Hello, everyone, and welcome to the AEC's podcast, Shapemakers. Before we dive into this week's episode, make sure that you're signed up for the Aluminum Extrusions Technical Seminar and Exposition, also known as ET, April 30th through May 2nd, 2024, at the Rosen Shingle Creek in Orlando, Florida. Make your travel plans now. Join the aluminum extrusion industry's professionals from over 50 countries. Do not hesitate any longer. Grab your tickets at ET'24.us. And now to our episode of Shapemakers.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another podcast. Today we are joined by Judy Runge of Comcoat International and George O of Quaker Houghton. Good morning, Judy and George.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Today we're going to talk about the in conjunction events, specifically one which is the Anodizing Essentials Class, which will be offered as part of ET'24. The Anodizing Essentials Class will happen on April 29th. To register for that class, let me go through and say that registration for the Anodizing Essentials Class can happen on anodizing.org in the Education and Conferences tab, as well as through aec.org in the ET Seminar tab, and then look for the In Conjunction events. So again, welcome to Judy and George. We appreciate you guys having the time today to sit with us and talk about everything that's anodizing essentials.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. So, before we get going, maybe a quick introduction for each of you. Judy, I'd let you go first, kind of tell us who you are or what you do, talk about AAC and everything that goes on there.
Sure. Well, hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Judy Runge. I'm a metallurgical engineer and a surface scientist in Chicago, Illinois. I have my own company, Comcoat International, and through that company, I offer consulting and teaching. I most recently retired from Apple. My specialty is in aluminum surface science and anodizing. I authored a book, The Metallurgy of Anodizing Aluminum, Connecting Science to Practice. Together with George, we are the co-chairmen for the Aluminum Anodizers Council, and we are the international trade association of firms that are engaged in anodizing. So we have firm members, supplier members, professional members, and our mission as a council, and especially of the Education Committee, is to support members and users of anodizing through that education, but also through advocacy and promotion of the industry at large.
Thank you. George?
All right. And I'll jump in. My name is Dr. George O. I am a research and development chemist with Quaker Houghton, where I've been for about coming on to 6 years now. I'm responsible for new formulations, maintaining the products that we have from a product perspective, a technical perspective. And also I help out with this and that, some of our environmental health and safety initiatives in our laboratory, some of our sustainability initiatives that we have coming up at our company. It's actually something we've been working on for a while now. We're just starting to really make some pushes for our sustainability efforts. So that's very exciting. And like Judy mentioned, I'm also the co-chair with Judy of the Education Committee for the Aluminum Anodizers Council, where we do lots of work making sure that we educate our membership and also non-members on anodizing, as well as programming the Anodizers Conference, which we have annually, and this year is coming up in Cleveland.
Yes, October 1st to 3rd at the Hilton Cleveland downtown. So
Beautiful Cleveland.
Guys there, yeah.
Cleveland rocks. We're looking forward to a great conference this fall. We're actively, through the Aluminum Anodizers Council, programming that event to make sure that, the members, that do attend are, filled with a wealth of information and knowledge from that particular event. Before we get going, more into the actual anodizing essentials, maybe Judy and George, anodizing is one of the things that it's been around for a long time, right? A lot of people think about it in terms of,
Yep.
architectural applications and the aesthetics of anodizing, or, what that does to the extrusions itself. But maybe talk about what you've seen over the last, I don't know, 10 years, right? Because it seems to continually evolve as far as some of the different end uses that need to be anodized. But maybe just talk a little bit for how you've seen the, let's say, the market change over the last several years.
I think anodizing is often overlooked because it's ubiquitous. It's just everywhere you turn, you're seeing an anodized product. It's essential beauty in maintaining the appearance of the aluminum, which in and of itself is a beautiful thing. But by adding color and decoration, as you mentioned, understanding it as a decorative element is something that we sort of take for granted. And the markets over the years have been essentially decorative, or for corrosion protection, or for wear resistance. And the newest applications may be those that utilize the amazing order of the oxide on its own, this nanoscale network of individual oxide tubes, if you will, that are assembled tightly and make a wonderful, almost honeycomb-like structure.
Yeah, we had a few speakers over the course
Yeah.
of the past few years that talked about some of the newer sort of applications. Was it 4 years ago when we had this one speaker talking about using it as a medical device detector, right?
Yes, this was Matthew Nickel, and he was from one of the Canadian universities. And the oxide, because of this tubular structure, can be used for a number of things, because people think of it as an insulator and it's actually a semiconductor. So when it is wet, it will conduct as a pin diode in one direction. That ability of the oxide enables it to act as a sensor, as George mentioned. There was also with airport safety and security, it as a detector for different drugs and different types of explosives. As a patterning device, the template that is from the anodic oxide can be used as an indenter to make highly ordered patterns on electrical devices. We can electroplate wires in
Yep.
the make nanowires.
There's all sorts of cool stuff coming out.
It's amazing. It's amazing what can be done. Coors, the beer company in Canada, actually makes oxide membranes. So they anodize ultra pure aluminum, and they make these membranes for sale as filters. So it's just I think that's such a small part of our industry. A lot of our day-to-day job shop anodizers look at it as cool, but don't see their role. I think it's been our role as AAC to bring this this technology even as an awareness to them, so that we're showing the broad picture for what the anodizing industry is.
Yeah. No, that's great, because I think, through my too many years of selling, marketing, doing business development of extrusions, right?
Mhm.
That the finish is something that's always comes, well, obviously it comes after the fact, but it's not something that somebody thinks about when they're designing a product.
Right.
And what the specific, let's say features and benefits of that anodizing layer are. And again, as working for an extruder, the end customer would say, okay, we want that anodized. So, the company, we go find an anodizer, we, put it through the process, and then the end customer gets it and it's not right, right? It either doesn't look right or it doesn't perform in some way that they want, because I think one of the things is that everybody, you see a specification in a book, you
Mhm.
apply that to the print, and well, it should work. And that's not necessarily the way it goes. So I think I'm using this as a segue to kind of get into the Anodizing Essentials class and, relate that back to, the people that are listening is, okay, what are you going to learn? How do you, I don't say, how do you use anodize, but what are some of the, the difficulties in that, whether it's on the quality side or on the production side. And so what are they going to take away from this particular course?
Well, I think the great thing about Anodizing Essentials is that anodizers, those who specify anodizing, extruders, the mechanical finishers, and the end user will all take something away in learning, having this comprehensive learning experience about anodizing, from the cleaning and the rinsing, through etching and polishing, to the actual anodizing, and then finishing that off with dyeing and sealing. Every step gives you insight to what you hold in your hand or admire when you're done, or see operating on the engine of your car. So every class that comprises Anodizing Essentials is taught by an industry expert. So people can bring their questions, no matter how fundamental, to Anodizing Essentials. And hopefully, through just interaction with the faculty, but also with the peers in the class, they'll leave the class with those answers.
Yeah, that's something that I've definitely seen in the classes, like just to use as an example. I think it was our racking class, I want to say, but it just talks about how do you put the parts on the racks for anodizing. And this isn't something necessarily that your extruder is going to think about, right? They're going to say, oh, if you're going to anodize this, it's going to come out with this finish. They might have some information about like the different things that are available in terms of color or in terms of texture, but they're not going to think about the racking. But this class gives them insight into sort of what the limitations are of the racking process and what that means for the finished product. And so an extruder who says, okay, well, I have this part and I've been told by someone down the line, by the specifier or the designer, that we need to have it be beautiful and we can't have even like a spot of like unanodized material on it. And the anodizer will say, well, wait a second. That's not something you can do. You have to have a rack mark somewhere. And so those little bits of information where people who aren't necessarily, who don't need to know the entire process, still benefit from knowing like the little bits and details that come out, so that they can say, okay, well, this is what I need to have in discussions with my customers or my specifiers. And to use another example, like one of the first class that our illustrious Judy teaches is actually the metallurgy class for anodizing. And it goes into how the metallurgy and how the processing of the aluminum affects the finish of the aluminum after the anodizing. And this is something that not necessarily a lot of extruders are going to know, that, if you do a poor job of, tempering your metal, if your solution treatment is not very good, you can actually get defects that are fine from a mechanical perspective, but from a finish perspective, really do a number on the anodizing. And having that perspective is something that we really do want our extruders to have.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up as far as the metallurgy goes. So obviously sustainability is, top of mind when, in the aluminum industry, as we start talking about, carbon reduction, recycling and that. So within, specifically in extrusions, obviously, one of the best ways is obviously increase your scrap utilization.
Yeah.
Which, comes along with a whole different hosts of, opportunities there into utilizing more scrap. But can you talk a little bit, and this probably goes back to something that, has been going on, for the last several years, but as, extruders start to utilize more scrap or different sources of raw materials, how can that affect the anodizing performance, aesthetics, everything that you're trying to, accomplish, in anodizing through the correct process?
Sure. It's a common misunderstanding of anodizing to think that it is a coating, because anodizing is an oxide. It should be thought of as something integral with the aluminum. When we anodize, we grow that oxide. So our growth direction is into the aluminum itself. So we're developing the microstructure as we prepare it prior to anodizing, and then as we grow the oxide. The network has grown, is generally pretty optically transparent. So when you look through the oxide to the interface with the extrusion, if the defects are large enough, you will see them. If the grain size is really big, and I'm talking in excess of 200 microns, you're going to see a mottled effect because of how this oxide grows. You can't anodize around a corner. A sharp corner will not anodize. So the design of the part to incorporate a radius rather than a sharp corner is something that needs to be kept in mind in the design of the part, where the intention is to have it finished with an anodic oxide. We highlight challenges because of recycled product. If things are not re-solutionized because their solubility, the particle solubility is low in remelting, only aluminum anodizes. So we have to keep in mind that our alloying elements, if they have come together to form a stable particle, these will not anodize. They will form discontinuities in the oxide. They may form a pit in the surface of the metal during pretreatment. So as we cover each step of the anodizing process in the Essentials class, these phenomena are highlighted and shown, not only by us teaching orally, but we show actual images, microscopic images, and then macroscopic images to show them how they appear. At the end of the class, oh, George, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, Judy, you're giving a talk on recycled alloys and anodizing during this conference, aren't you?
Yes, actually, my co-author,
Hmm.
Dr. Peter Totaro, is presenting a paper that we co-authored together with anodizing guru, really guru, Fred Shadle. It's called Anodizing Strategy for Recycled Aluminum Alloys with Aerospace Applications. So
Yeah,
it's going to be a beautiful paper. Well, it's
I'm
a simple
definitely planning
paper.
on going to that talk. And there's actually another talk that I'm going to mention right now, which is Margareta Halseed from Hydro is also giving a talk on, let's see, I'm looking at the program right here, right now, that we got in the mail, but it's the influence of trace elements on surface quality of anodized and powder coated 6000 series profiles. But these are both talks that are talking about recycled alloys and sustainability, and they're going to talk a lot about what Judy was talking about, where you have different elements, you have different, you have different particles, you have different intermetallics that affect the anodization and affect the appearance. And the essentials class is going to give you a lot of the sort of the fundamental sort
Right.
of baseline for understanding what's going on at these talks.
Yeah. At each step of the process. So that's, I think, super cool that if you could, when in essentials, we actually distill it to the essentials. So each step of the entire anodizing process, and the insights to best practices obviously are presented. And then, of course, actual anodizing or oxide growth is the highlight.
Mhm.
So it's a very comprehensive class. I think there's a lot to take away.
Yeah, and we haven't even gotten into some of the other classes that we have, like the rinse water class,
Oh,
and
yeah.
how to maintain your rinses and make sure that you're running a more sustainable operation. Like the Aluminum Anodizers Council meeting for the past 2 years has been themed on sustainability because it is such for us as well. It's such a big deal, and yeah, there are a lot of topics that come up in essentials that have direct bearing on sustainability of customer operations.
Yeah. No, that's great. I think that's one of the, one of the opportunities for whether you're definitely involved in the AAC. So as far as the anodizing essentials class goes, I mean, you would recommend this for not only, let's say floor level anodizing employees,
Yep,
extruders, that
absolutely.
may or may not have an anodizer, because chances are, you know, some of the product that they're producing is going to be anodized, whether they understand it or not.
Yeah.
And then also end users, which has been a focus of the ET seminar, is to bring in more end users from the OEM levels, whether it's automotive, architectural, a variety of industrial applications. We're promoting ET into to bring them in, because I think the overall industry feels that an informed customer is the best customer. Right. So you can really go through and work a lot quicker in resolving the issues that do come up with manufacturing processes, because
Yeah.
not everything happens the same way every single time.
Yeah.
Correct.
So maybe, if you have anything to elaborate on the type of people that should come to the Anodizing Essentials class, would be great.
So the answer is everybody. And to be more specific, okay, so as a case study, this actually comes up in the classes. So one of the industries that we service are people who do recessed lining. It's the reflective sort of like anodized aluminum part that reflects back the whatever light out onto wherever it's supposed to light. And so, you think about the requirements for this. You want it to be very reflective, you want it to be very bright, but also you want, it's under a lot of heat sometimes, not so much nowadays, but sometimes it can be under a lot of heat. You want that corrosion protection. You want it to have, people are going to install it, you want to be fairly mechanically robust. So then the question becomes, what's the balance of these things? Because this is not something that a designer might necessarily know. But if you're anodizing, you are necessarily making a trade-off between specular reflectivity and corrosion resistance. And this depends on your alloy selection. And Judy can talk about this at length. And if you go to the class and you raise your hand and say, Judy, please tell me, like, what is the trade-off here? How can I play with these parameters? You will get an answer. But even just like, even if you don't ask questions, like just looking at all of the different aspects of the anodizing process and the anodizing science that we teach really gives you insight into sort of what those trade-offs are and how to get how to optimize what you want. And, you know, like I use recessed lighting reflection as an example, but this is also true of trim for automotive parts. This is also going to be true for boat parts. You know, you're making a different trade-off there, right? Like you need that corrosion protection much more, but you still want a pretty product. So where is your trade-off? Where is your cutoff for saying we need this much corrosion protection? And the class also will help you understand, you know, what is a baseline level of corrosion protection? How can you specify that level of corrosion protection? What tests are there out there? And how can you talk with your anodizer about making sure you're using the right test and maybe tweaking the test a little bit to say we need more corrosion protection?
Yeah, that's great. Because you hit on something for me. I get very tunnel vision when it comes to talking about extrusions, right? Because obviously ET is, you know, an extrusion seminar, but the Anodizers Council really lays across the entire spectrum of all different types of aluminum, whether it's extrusions, whether it's, you know, sheet. You know, Judy mentioned, you know, aerospace, you know, so different forms, and then also different end markets that, you know, I guess ET doesn't necessarily, you know, focus on. And maybe you can talk a little bit there as to some of the, you know, some of the differences in from an extrusion to a rolled product, because you mentioned, you know, the lighting industry and the reflectivity, which I can only imagine there's, you know, a fair amount of drawn or formed, you know, sheet product that's behind there.
Well, yeah, I think the industry and anodizing certainly has grown with the aluminum industry, and the aluminum industry has grown with applications such as aerospace and aircraft and automotive. So in looking at extrusions, we're typically in looking at rolled product and looking at under the hood automotive applications, we're looking at aerospace, aircraft, and the defense industry, distinctly different alloy classes. You know, looking at extrusions, I would say the workhorse is 6061, 6063 alloys, where we're looking at magnesium silicide precipitation as the primary driver for the difference in this alloy from any other alloys. For the marine alloys, we're looking at the 5000 series alloy, where the primary alloying element is magnesium. How they react in anodizing is distinctly different. And then when we use these alloys, where we can tune the process to yield a highly reflective finish, very decorative, very aesthetically pleasing, when we jump to the more complex alloys, the 2000 series alloys, where we're alloyed primarily with copper, but we've also have magnesium, and then we go to the 7000 series alloys, where we are the most complex. The more alloying elements that we have, and keeping in mind that aluminum is the only thing that produces our highly ordered oxide, the more things there are to get in the way. So if we think about the anodizing process, our preparation for making that surface ready to grow an oxide, we have to, in a controlled way, get everything out of the way that could possibly interfere with that aluminum anodizing. So we're working hard to remove intermetallic particles. We're working hard to remove these phase soluble phases in the surface itself, and to maintain its decorative attribute or maintain its order and continuity so it can withstand impact, so it can withstand fatigue vibrations, so it can be, as George has really nailed hard, corrosion resistant. Tying the alloy and the necessary performance to how you anodize is something that we hit on and cover in Anodizing Essentials. But in our other classes, in our troubleshooting and quality workshop, in our advanced anodizing class, we take deeper dives and we hit this even harder and with more detail.
Wow. That's a lot, right?
Yeah,
I mean, I think
it is a lot.
The more I think I know, the actually turns out to be the opposite way. And these types of classes, whether they're, you know, the basic anodizing essentials class, you know, going into the more, you know, let's say more graduate level anodizing classes that are offered through the Anodizers Council. I mean, that is the basis for, you know, obviously the knowledge base of what people need to know then to be successful. Because I think the last thing we want as an industry, whether it's extrusions or sheet and plate, whatever it is to have a customer specify something, we make it to their specification, and then not have it work, right?
Oh, yeah.
So we really need to have that dialogue, you know, between end user, you know, producer, anodizer, to make sure that it comes together the way that they need it. Because I think a lot of times in today's world, you know, the Amazon world, where you just slide it and it shows up at your door and it's what you wanted, that doesn't work in manufacturing.
Nah.
Not in basically custom manufacturing as we're all engaged in. So that's really, I think, the importance of it is kind of this, you know, getting the knowledge out there. And we so much appreciate you guys doing this, and, you know, helping us advance the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, if people are interested in the advanced class, we do offer it at our annual conference, the Anodizers Council conference. But if you can't make that and you want us to do advanced or troubleshooting at ET or something else, you know, let us know. Shoot us a line.
Yeah.
It's not out of the question.
Not at all. And we're happy to do it. So the class is on Monday, and
Yep. It's Monday the 29th before the conference starts, and it is a great way to, I mean, it's a significant class. You will spend all day on it. You will come out of it a little bit tired and with your brain full of anodizing knowledge, but it's a great way to go into the conference with like all this fresh material, ready to look at some of the other talks in the context of anodizing and saying, okay, well, how will this affect the finish? How will this look to my end users? I think the timing of the class or the positioning of the class before the conference itself is pretty ideal.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly, you know, the reason for these in conjunction events, because there's not only the Anodizing Essentials class, there's a finishing workshop, there's a process optimization class, there is a die clinic, you know, basic die clinic. So whether they happen before ET or after ET, you know, in the middle of it, you know, the sandwich, the meat of the whole thing is ET, which then you can take what you learned in an essentials class. There is a finish and anodizing track, which will be, you know, probably 10 to 12 papers that will be presented there. With the ET seminar itself, you know, a registrant to ET is basically given all of the papers, because the whole goal is that you go to this event and you take it back, right? It's all about the continuous improvement of the industry and your processes. And that's what ET is set up to do. And that's why the in conjunction events, happen around ET, is so you can, as a attendee of one of the events, you have things to take back to your job and to make your company better. And I think overall, that's the high level, the top thing that we want to have happen is people take these things home and they do something with them. And that's the most important. And that works for ET. That works for the Anodizers Council. That works for the Aluminum Extruders Council, is that these are all set up to make your companies better. So with that, I would thank you both, Judy and George, for your participation, your contributions. It is very clear. You guys, I think what I like to say is, everybody gives not only their minds, but they give their hearts. And you can really hear it in how you guys talk about this and the passion that you have in discussing these, these opportunities with us. So I thank you for joining me today, and I look forward to, the end of April and seeing you all in Orlando.
Yeah, I mean, Judy, we'll miss you, but I will be there, so I'll be happy to see people, and I will actually also be presenting a talk in the same track. So hopefully I'll see Jason, you there, and some of our listeners there as well.
Yeah.
What's your title, George?
My title is, what is it? Effects of Temper on Anodized 6063 Aluminum Appearance and Architectural Quality Testing Performance. So basically what we did was we looked at a bunch of different aluminum tempers and see what happened to all the anodizing parameters that we typically look at from a quality perspective. It's we got some neat tidbits of data that came out of that. It's pretty cool.
Well, it's really germane and applicable to the architectural industry.
Absolutely.
I think that's the other thing the AAC tries to do with our papers, is we really try to make them be applicable to our membership and
We
our
do.
delegates.
We do.
Work really hard for that.
All right, but thanks for having us, Jason.
Yeah,
right.
thanks, Jason, so much.
Thank you.
Have
You
a
guys
great
enjoy.
day. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.